When I joined independent media 2 years ago, I was surprised at the level of vitriol leveled at me simply for doing the work of holding the government accountable without accepting taxpayer dollars. In the years since, those attacks have only increased along with the prowess of independent media. Earlier this month, the tenant media bombshell erupted, in which a conservative media outlet run by Canadians in the US allegedly accepted $10 million in funding from Russia state controlled media outlet. Now, I didn't have anything to do with that, but that hasn't stopped online anonymous losers from accusing everyone in my field of being a covert Russian spy. No surprises there. But the slander took a weightier turn last week when a Liberal MP accused a conservative influencer and social media editor of another independent media outlet of being paid by a foreign government. He's now being sued for defamation in a lesson we can only hope translates into putting your money where your mouth is. We'll be hearing from internet sensation Kat Kanada and the Countersignal editor-in-chief Keean Bexte today. Rebel News President Ezra Levant will join the show later to weigh in on Russiagate, as well as the failing Liberals. I'm Rachel Parker. Welcome to The Rachel Parker Show. Kat, Keean, thank you both so much for being here. I know that you both have a lot to do since you are running your own media organization and now you have this big lawsuit on your hands. So I want to start off, Kat, by just asking you. So Tenant Media, the Canadian Conservatives, Lauren Chen and her husband Liam Donovan founded it. You really only got tangled up in this because you appeared on that show. You were interviewed by Lauren Southern. We know that the hosts who ran shows for Tenant Media say that they're also victims in this case. They did not know that Tenant Media was accepting money from Russia. Can you just start by telling us why did you agree to appear on the show and what did you talk about with Lauren when you first had this Tenant Media appearance that has now just blown up so much?
Right, yeah. So I met Lauren just a few weeks prior to that at a freedom conference in Victoria, and we became, acquaintances. She messaged me later down the road to ask me if I wanted to join her show to talk about communism and the dangers of it, given what state of our country is currently in under the Trudeau Liberals. And she wanted to basically see if I see any similarities happening currently in Canada compared to the country that I once lived in. And so I decided to absolutely go on her show and share my memories, my experience, my current observations within our own country here in Canada, and the warning signs and the danger signs of, the rise of authoritarianism here, because I wanted people to know, I wanted to people hear it from someone like myself who's lived under communism before, under an authoritarian regime before. So that's why I agreed to do her show.
So you were essentially doing the show to warn Canadians about the dangers of authoritarian regimes, and now you're being accused, wrongly, of course, of being paid by authoritarian regimes.
That's basically it. It's if it wasn't so egregious in terms of what I've had to deal with since the accusations have poured in, baseless accusations, it's pretty funny because the claims are so ridiculous, and the people who are making these accusations don't do a single ounce of research before just throwing mud at the wall like that. I've agreed to do her show. I was on there once. I'm not, implicated in anything, in any documents. Basically, just a third degree victim of whatever is happening with that situation. And yeah, it's
The outrageous thing here, if I may, is that Kat left an authoritarian regime to come to Canada, and she's lucky to be able to talk about it here. And then Mark Gerretsen comes into this conversation, as you showed on the screen earlier, to threaten, actually to call for her to be dragged in front of Parliament. That is how authoritarian regimes behave. And it was predicated on a lie, which means that he was abusing his office to drag a journalist as some sort of cruel punishment. I don't know if Mark knew that he was a liar when he tweeted that, or if he's just stupid. But here's the point. Journalists in this country have a right to exist, and they have a right to exist outside of government punishment for doing the work that they do. Kat has been super effective over the last few months while she's been with the Countersignal, last few years actually, fighting against corrupt regimes around the world by exposing them. She does that here at home. She does that with regimes abroad in Europe. And she's not going to stop. She's not going to be intimidated by Mark Gerretsen, of course. But it's important that we lay down the law here and show people in power that they can't abuse journalists like this. They can't defame them. And what's the worst thing about this? You know, I love Kat. She's one of the best people we've ever hired at the Countersignal. And the issue that she's facing now is constant death threats, constant abuse leveled at her, quoting Mark Gerretsen, someone who's in a position of authority over her and the rest of the country, actually. Mark Gerretsen is the deputy House leader of the governing Liberals. He has a seriously senior position in Parliament. He's actually the person that brings people in to testify in front of committees. And he said on Twitter that he wanted to do that. Now, he did offer a really, really, really hollow retraction, no apology at all. And that's just not going to cut it. You might see the retraction that he posted. He didn't even tag Kat. He tagged an incorrect account, which makes it seem like you can see Kat Kanada there. That's not actually her handle. So if you click on that, you'll see that it says this account has been suspended. So anyone who's interested at all in getting to the bottom of this would click on that and would see, oh, maybe there is some weight to this. Maybe Kat actually did do something wrong. And of course she didn't. Her hands are totally clean in this situation, and she's a victim as much as anyone else.
So, Keean, obviously, he's got a lot of things wrong here. How concerning it is that a sitting Liberal MP, and as you mentioned, the Deputy House Minister, is not able to get basic facts about this case correct.
Well, he's just obviously blinded by his ideology. He's blinded by the disappointing polls that the Liberals have been seeing, and they're desperate. And they take that out on who they perceive to be their enemies. And in this case, their enemy is Kat and the Countersignal. Their enemy is anyone who holds them accountable for their actions. Obviously, this is going to be a big issue for him. We're not concerned that he has to face an election. We're going to drag him to court if we have to. Our settlement offer is pretty, extremely fair. In fact, we asked Mark to donate $1,000 to an Nanaimo food bank. That was a charity of Kat's choice. That was a symbolic, we thought, of the damages he did, not just to Kat, but the damage that the Liberals have done to this entire country. Food bank usage is at an all-time high in this country, and we thought that that would be fitting. We also asked him to post an apology tweet on his Twitter. It's 3 tweets long, and it's pretty specific. We'll see if he agrees to doing that or not. It would be hugely humiliating for him to do that, but it's important that that sends a message to everyone who saw his original tweet. The math here, over 300,000 people saw his original tweet. That's about 1% of the country, which is a huge number of people. Then his poor retraction, which didn't even tag Kat properly, was seen by a similar amount of people, but those people are different because of the way the Twitter algorithm works. The first set of tweets were seen by people who support Mark Gerretsen and who hate conservatives, and it emboldened them to send Kat death threats. It emboldened them to hurl abuse at her, defamatory abuse, in fact. And then this follow-up tweet was seen by people who don't like Mark Gerretsen already. Those are the people who would have shared it, obviously. So there's a huge disconnect between the people that have actually seen an update to Mark's lies, and then there's a huge amount of people who have seen that original tweet and haven't seen a thing since then. Every day that this stands is added damages to Kat's reputation, and in fact to the Countersignal as well, because we are the ones that hired Kat and pay Kat, and we don't take money from the Russians either, just like I assume True North does, and mostly every conservative outlet or independent outlet in this country. So Mark Gerretsen has a lot to lose here. There's a lot on the line, and we're not going to back down at all because he needs to see justice.
So, Keean, you're asking Mark Gerretsen to make a donation to a food bank to issue a proper apology and correction for his incorrect tweet. And I understand they're also asking him to unblock Kat off of Twitter, which is, pretty custom for sitting members of parliament. They shouldn't be blocking Canadians or certainly their constituents. When will we learn what his response is going to be? I think a lot of people have kind of been really eagerly awaiting your follow up.
Yeah.
When will we know what his response is?
Yeah, so we gave him a deadline of Friday last week. He came back to us with a counteroffer, which we deemed completely unacceptable. He asked us to, if he settled and agreed to give money to the food bank, that we would never talk about this again, which is, a non-starter completely. We're not going to rely on one tweet from Mark Gerretsen to defend Kat's reputation or the Countersignal's reputation. We will talk about this until the end of time because it's the truth and because Mark Gerretsen lied and defamed one of our reporters. And we will stand up every single time and we will take this to the end because Mark Gerretsen needs to be held accountable. And everyone who's thinking about lying to push their ideological agenda, to push this hoax that Russia is for some reason behind every conservative in this country who doesn't like Justin Trudeau, it needs to stop. And we are going to put a stop to it ourselves.
And Kat, I just wanted to go to you one last time. What has the impact of this been on your personal life? I know Keean said that you've been receiving death threats. Has this been, something that you found has really impacted your personal life, or is it pretty much relegated to the online sphere right now?
Well, for example, when it's anonymous trolls chirping at me with these ridiculous allegations that are completely unfounded, it's easy to just wave them away and to not think about it again. But when it's a sitting member of parliament dragging my name online, it certainly does, have implications for my personal life because now I'm constantly wondering and looking over my shoulder, like, is a crazy person going to come for me when I'm walking on the street? Am I going to get recognized? Is a crazy person going to do something more than just call for my, send death threats to me? Like, you just never know what kind of crazies are out there. So yeah, it's certainly impacted my personal life, not just online, but offline as well, in that I think about it more. I'm cautious and nervous when I step outside now.
And Keean, just my last question for you here. As I mentioned, I know people are really following this case closely. Where can they go for updates? Where can they go to support you guys?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. They can go to suegerretsen.com. There we'll have updates on everything. And I should note, our settlement terms to Mark right now are extremely generous. As the publisher of the Counter Signal, I'm sort of, trying to walk this line of defending our reporters, but also coming to a quick settlement so that Mark corrects the record and protects Kat's reputation. That said, if Mark doesn't agree to our terms, which expire today, we will go to court. We will sue him, and our demands will change, and the damages will change. Mark won't just be able to get off with $1,000 donation to a food bank. He will be paying a lot more. And that just reflects the fact that he could have corrected the record immediately, and he chose not to. He chose to hide behind his lies, and that's just not acceptable.
Kat, Keean, thank you both so much.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks for having us.
We'll now be joined by Rebel News founder Ezra Levant. Ezra, thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We were just joined by Kat and Keean, who were telling us a little bit about the Counter Signal's lawsuit against Liberal MP and Deputy House Leader Mark Gerretsen, as he incorrectly claimed that Kat was being paid by a foreign government following the fallout of the tenant media scandal. You've been commenting a little bit on this line online. I know you know a lot about defamation law. I just want to tell you what Kat and Keean are asking for and to see how likely you think. So currently, the terms are set to expire today, and if Gerretsen doesn't agree to a settlement, they will be going to court. But currently, they're asking Mark Gerretsen to unblock Kat on X. They're asking him to make a donation to a food bank and to issue a correction and an apology tweet online to really set the record straight. Do you think that these are fair terms for Mark Gerretsen to agree to?
Yeah, and they're very easy for him to agree to. I mean, he just has to swallow his pride. That's very hard for a politician to do. I suppose all of us are quite proud and we don't want to admit that we're wrong. But in terms of defamation law, that's a pretty light penalty. If I heard you correctly, they're not even asking for their legal costs, just $1,000 donation to charity, and Gerretsen would get the tax benefit of that. I like the idea of Gerretsen not being allowed to ban Kat because as a journalist, she has the right to access information through government Twitter accounts. You may know that a couple of years ago, I sued Stephen Guilbeault and then 3 other cabinet ministers for blocking Rebel News on Twitter. And we went to the federal court and we actually, in the end, got a consent order that they can't ban us for the rest of their careers because I think it's accepted law in Canada now that if it's a government, that is a public Twitter account, you can't discriminate any more than you could stop someone going into a government office, like to get a driver's license. Now, I don't know if that applies to backbenchers like Gerretsen, but I think there is a good precedent in Canada that government Twitter accounts cannot block you any more than a government phone number could hang up on you because they don't like your politics. I'm glad to see the counter signal standing up. Rebel News does this a lot. We fight for our people using the courts of law, but not a lot of groups on the right do it. We're not as litigious, even though we're harmed all the time. Now, let me just say a word about freedom of speech. I believe in freedom of speech, and I believe we should go quite far for freedom of speech. And I believe in the Canadian legal custom that you're allowed to express almost any opinion, even if it's an extreme opinion. But what's different is when someone, especially someone authoritative in government, says something that's not a matter of opinion, but says something false as a matter of fact. Because if Gerretsen in this case had just said, I don't like the counter signal, they're too pro-Russia. Okay, well, that's an opinion, and everyone can see that's an opinion, and you can agree or disagree or find it unreasonable or reasonable, but no one thinks of that as any more than, oh, there's Gerretsen mouthing off. But what he did is different. He said, you are being paid by Putin to do certain things to me. And it had an extra ring of credibility because there had been a revelation that another media group called Tenet Media had done exactly that, had taken $10 million from Russia to set up fake, pro-Russian accounts or something, or to set up this sort of secret pro-Putin network. So the difference between Gerretsen giving his opinion, which is, I hate you, I don't like you, you're bad, you're pro-Putin, that's all identifiable as opinion, and people can take it or leave it. I really don't think it would persuade a lot of people. But what he did was he made a false fact. He said, as a factual statement, you are taking money from Putin to contact me and harass me. Well, that's not a matter of opinion. That's either true or not. And in this case, Gerretsen lied. That's dictionary definition disinformation. And it can be quite harmful. We heard what Kat just said there about in her personal life, but let's talk about her professional life. If someone actually thought that she was not a real journalist, but rather just a message machine for Putin, no one would take her seriously as a journalist. It could affect her prospects, who would do interviews with her career prospects. She would be written off. And the fact that it's based on her ethnicity, I understand she's Russian ethnically, that sort of implies she's culturally disloyal to Canada. So there were a lot of awful things there. And it's nice to see the Liberals get smacked around. And frankly, that's something that we like to do here at Rebel News, is to take Liberals to court. I think we've done it 7 times now. And we've had a few important victories over the years too.
When we talk about you guys liking to take, the Liberals to court, I know that you yourself have been sort of swatting down your own allegations online of people accusing you of being a Russian propagandist or Russian spy or paid by a foreign government, whatever you want to call it. At this point, have you had to formally issue a defamation notice to anyone?
Well, it's funny you say that because literally just last night, a couple of radical leftists claimed that we were somehow working with the Kremlin, which is the opposite of the truth. I don't know if you know this. I mean, my family originally in 1903 came from the Ukrainian city of Dnipro, which is sort of the center of Jewish life in that part of Ukraine. So ethnically, historically, I'm from Ukraine. My family members are Ukrainian. And I have no time for the authoritarian leadership of Vladimir Putin. I know he's an ex-KGB agent. I know he's brutal. I don't support his invasion of another country. He's invaded various countries. And I don't know if you remember, but about 10 years ago, I wrote a book called Ethical Oil, The Case for Canada's Oil Sands. And then I wrote a sequel called Groundswell, The Case for Fracking. And I really went hard on Putin. And I said, look, Europe is buying all this natural gas from Russia. Not only are they making themselves potential hostages for Russia to turn off the tap, but they're financing Russia's war machine. I wrote my Groundswell book in 2014, and I said the number one weapon Russia uses in Ukraine is not an artillery system, it's the energy weapon. They turned off the tap to Ukraine in the winter, and they used the cash from Europe to finance the war. So the idea of claiming that I'm pro-Putin when I wrote a book that is so anti-Putin, it's not safe for me to travel to Russia, not that I would, is absurd. And again, people could say, oh, Ezra, you're not pro-Ukrainian enough. And, that could be their opinion. But when you move from an opinion to what I saw a couple people on Twitter yesterday said, which is that we worked with the Kremlin, the Kremlin actually put things on our website. That's absurd. It's false. It's factually untrue. And obviously you don't want to go chasing every loser on the internet, half of whom are anonymous. But if it's a high profile person who has a lot of credibility, I think you got to do something. I mean, Mark Gerretsen is a member of parliament in the government. And although a lot of people consider him a clown, he's still authoritative in that he is part of the government. And if a member of parliament accuses someone of being a Russian spy, that carries more weight than if some drunk hobo were to shout it out when you pass by. So obviously you don't want to chase down every liar on the internet. That would be an endless job. But I think every once in a while you have to take a step to protect your reputation and to let people know that criticism is fine, but don't make up factual lies that are damaging. I mean, we have part of the essential Rebel News brand is that we never take money from the government. And it's true. We've eschewed all funding, especially from Justin Trudeau. So the allegation that we're actually working with a government, and not just the Canadian one, but a foreign one hostile to us, if anyone believed that, that would be so damaging. And again, that's not just, hey, Ezra, you should be more pro-Ukrainian. Okay, that's a matter of opinion. It could be right, could be wrong. But to say you are working with the Kremlin, they are putting things on your website, that's a false statement. But if someone says that authoritatively, someone might actually believe that. So I believe in every once in a while, stopping to defend your reputation. And if someone won't correct the record voluntarily, get a judge to correct it. And I've had, mixed results in defamation court, and we're probably in there too often. But I think that the Liberals and their regime media get away with too much, partly because conservatives just roll over. We don't fight back in all the ways we can. The left is very good at fighting and threatening, and I don't believe in malicious litigation. I don't believe in vexatious litigation. But if there is a prominent person who says, I have factual evidence you are letting the Kremlin publish on your platform, and if that is a lie, but he says it, that sounds like the kind of thing you got to go to court to get a judge to say that's a lie. And that's my opinion. We'll see what the courts have to say.
Ezra, initially when the tenant media scandal broke and we saw some of the subsequent stories, there's certainly a lot of outlets on the left that are doing anything they can to tie the tenant media scandal to outlets like Rebel News, to True North, to the Counter Signal. I thought, oh, this is turning out to be a big nuisance for us in the independent media. And you saw all the anonymous trolls come out and make those same claims. And then you saw, a few real dummies like Mark Gerretsen take things a bit too far. And, the Counter Signal is fighting back on that. And as you said, I think rightfully so. I think it's good that they do that. And they're a smaller player. They haven't been around as long as True North and certainly as long as Rebel News. And so I think for them to set this precedent that we're not going to allow ourselves and we're not going to allow our reporters to be slandered is good and important. And I'm wondering if you think that these desperate efforts on the left to tie all of us to the tenant media scandal is ultimately going to backfire in the end.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's sort of embarrassing how much the Trudeau Liberals try to replicate the U.S. Democrat narratives. For example, they tried to brand the 2022 Trucker Freedom Convoy as our Canadian version of the January 6th insurrection. They were trying so hard to force that narrative, and many in the media were only too happy to oblige, but it just wasn't true. There was no riot. There was no breaking into buildings. It was hot tubs and bouncy castles and peacefulness. And I think independent media helped do that. Okay, so now they're trying to have the Russian collusion narrative. And again, they're just copying what they think works in the United States. This one, how will they do on this one? The problem with the Tenet media story that you mentioned is that it actually was some independent journalists who got, I don't know how anyone could think, and in the case of Tenet Media, there was about a half a dozen journalists, independent journalists, citizen journalists, YouTubers who were invited to join. Not all of them knew where the money came from, but if they were getting paid $100,000 a video and they didn't think something was wrong, that's a head scratcher. I mean, other than rock stars or Mr. Beast, no one makes $100,000 in a video. I think they should have been more alive to it. But I think that gave some fresh fodder to brand everyone a Russian spy. It's not the case. And in fact, there's a lot of irony there, because I think the Canadian government has done outrageous things to support Russia. I don't know if you remember, but part of some very important pipeline turbines had to be serviced, of the Russian pipeline, were sent to Montreal to be refurbished by SNC-Lavalin, of all companies. Now, this was contrary to the Canadian sanctions, but Justin Trudeau waived the sanctions to allow this important Russian pipeline to be maintained in Canada while the war is going on. So Trudeau's tub thumping about how he'll be with Ukraine to the very end. Oh, except if it involves a lucrative contract for his buddies at SNC-Lavalin. So there really are some things I think we should be more careful of. I think Iran is running amok in Canada. 700 Iranian agents, according to Global News, are operating in Canada. We know that China has compromised nearly a dozen parliamentarians. So that's real foreign interference. I think one of the reasons Trudeau is accusing domestic conservative peaceful opponents of being Russian is partly to distract from the actual foreign interference here, Iran, China, and frankly to distract from his own cooperation with Russian oil companies. I don't know. I put it this way. I don't think that's going to save Justin Trudeau in the next election. But he's sloshing around a lot of money. He's calling it misinformation. I mean, when you say misinformation and foreign interference, a lot of people are worried. But we're not going to let them get away with labeling us, and I'm glad Counter Signal's not letting them get away with that.
Ezra, super quickly before I let you go, when we talk about Justin Trudeau in the next election, of course, the Liberals lost a seat in Montreal over the weekend, went to the Bloc Québécois. A lot of people celebrating this, understandably so. Good news for the Bloc. But I have to wonder, what does this actually translate into for Canadians who are just sort of waiting for an election? We know that the Bloc is looking at propping up the Liberal government after the supply confidence agreement with the NDP fell apart. So does this actually translate into a possible election coming? Does this translate into Justin Trudeau resigning, or are things going to kind of continue ticking along as they have been?
The loss last night in the by-election Monday night in Manitoba was expected. The NDP always do well in that district. But the riding in Montreal called Le Salamar-Verdun is Liberal heartland. That's where their former Justice Minister, David Lametti, had his seat. That's where, I don't know if you remember way back in the day, Paul Martin, the Liberal Prime Minister. So this is Liberal turf for decades. The fact that they lost that in the heart of Montreal has got to be terrifying to the Liberal caucus.
Ezra, thank you so much for your insight today. I really appreciate that. And now we'll be turning to the final segment of the show, the most shocking clip of the week. We're going to play that for you. But if you guys think that there is a more shocking news clip this week, let me know what you think it is in the comments below. Maybe I'll get to it next week. As some of you know, I have a deep interest in Alberta politics, hailing from the province, and I've promised my Alberta followers that I would be paying close attention to Alberta news and do some Alberta coverage on my new show. So we're going to start by taking a look at this clip, you guys might remember Jennifer Johnson was kicked out of the United Conservative Party caucus during the general election and was told to sit as an independent for comments that she made against the trans community. She is now hoping to get back into caucus and is doing that work of re-education. And we got a little look at what that was looking like for her this week. Take a look at this next clip.
I'm going to throw it over to Victoria now, and she'll just touch on a little bit more about that.
Hi, Jennifer. I really want to thank you for meeting with us today and taking the time to try to signal that this is more of a priority for you.
Absolutely. Delighted to meet with you all.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Before I would ever say, though, that this was a productive meeting and be counted to the list of contacts that you've reached out to in the queer community, I have to know a few things of where you sit. Will you state on the record right now that trans women are women?
I've never been asked that before.
Will you say that on the record right now?
No, I want to have some time to think on that.
Okay, well, that's me. Have a great day. And I will be speaking out against this meeting because you are clearly not ready to have this. So I'm not going to be added to the list of meetings that you are going to have with people where you say, well, I met this person and this person, because no. You can't say I've had these consultations and use that as justification for you to work your way back into caucus, which is why we know you're really here. This only happens. This meeting is only happening because you're on Twitter, in the Twitter sphere, and people are debating whether or not you're going to be led back into caucus, and Premier Smith is debating that. And so you need to do some PR work. And I'm not going to be your Band-Aid. I'm not going to be your pink washing unless you can tell me right now that you believe that I, as a trans woman, right now, right here, am a woman. Then we don't have a lot to work on here. You want to talk about listening to the community? If you can't start with that basic foundational principle that we are who we say we are in our bones, then I don't think we're on the same page for working forward. So I'll give you one last chance. Are trans women women? Will you say that on the record right now?
Victoria, we can disagree on things. And
Not on that.
still
Not on
be-
my identity. No. Not
And
on
I
that.
can still care
No.
about you, even if we disagree.
Wonderful. But I will be speaking out against this meeting 100% if you can't say that right now.
An absolutely stunning and honestly, frankly, quite sickening video to watch. It's clear that that trans individual was recording this from the beginning and was trying to get a clip of Jen Johnson to go viral online to have his 10 minutes of fame. Well, listen, Jen Johnson deserves our respect. She obviously really stood her own in there. She was being pressured to say that men can be women when we know that they cannot be. And I think a lot of times in politics, you know, she's been put in a very difficult situation, being kicked out of the caucus and not being able to be as effective as an independent MLA. But you know, I watched that clip and I have a lot of respect for her for standing her ground and for not being pressured. The individual that was in that clip was not interested in having a discussion with Jen. They were not interested in actually talking through some of the issues. They simply wanted MLA Jen Johnson to just go along and agree without thinking and to say the thing that they want us to say. And that's so much of what society has become nowadays. It's not about actually having dialogue with people and talking about our differences and our disagreements. It's just about needing to say the right thing all the time. That was what we saw during COVID with masks. It wasn't about whether or not masks were effective. It was just the act of putting one on to show that you were on the government side, that you were on medicine and you were on science's team. Even though many people doubted that they worked at the beginning of the pandemic, you might remember we were told we didn't need to wear them. And once that narrative changed, it became the most important thing. So for those of you who are in Alberta, I think that it is important to show Jen Johnson some respect. She's obviously being lambasted by the left on this. And many of us talk about how it's important to stand up for our beliefs, but we aren't actually challenged in the way that MLA Jen Johnson is being challenged right now. And, you know, some of us would probably crack under that pressure as well. So if you're in Alberta, make sure you send her office an email, let her know that you're supporting her, that you appreciate her. Email the Premier's office, let her know that you think she should be allowed back into the caucus because, as I said on X this morning, Jen actually displays two really rare qualities for politician, and one that is courage, and second, that is an ability to think for herself. Everyone, thank you so much for joining the show today. In weeks to come, we'll be covering federal politics, Alberta politics, Politics. We'll be covering American politics, culture, health. If you guys have any clips or content you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments section below. I will see you guys next week, unless you want to tune into my American Politics podcast on Wednesday, Rachel and the Republic. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week. God bless.